Hi, hello, welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers with me, Rob Ryan, your host. And today we've got a special guest. It's me, Rob Ryan, your host. Yes, we're celebrating a special anniversary episode to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the expansion and rebranding of our show to what you know it as today, Entrepreneurial Thinkers. But we're also going to dip back and talk about the history of how we got here, the value and critical importance of diversity, equity, inclusivity, and as I say, being woke, being awake to the world's realities, and why we think those values align so deeply with what we do here at the show. And then we're going to also just take a break and do something I never do in the show, which is to just share a lot more about myself. For those that don't know me or don't know me well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to give you a lot more context on how I got here and what my life was like growing up. For those that do know me well, or you're just maybe filling a couple of blanks, or you'll just hear the same entertaining stories that I've wowed you with for years. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did making it for you. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you know, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of our society and industry as we come together to try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Well, today, we've got something special in mind for you. This is our anniversary issue on a couple of different fronts. And I thought it was the perfect time for me to share some thoughts on the 1-year anniversary of our show's expansion to become the show that you know today, Entrepreneurial Thinkers, from the show that it was, Mentors Today, at its start. Also to celebrate just kind of that, the 5-year journey that we've been on, as well as just this last year. But also then to kind of double down and remind everybody about my why and about our why, and why we absolutely believe that these conversations that we're having here are so fundamentally important at any time in history, but especially right now. And then finally, I'm going to try and do this first. I'm going to lead off and actually take a few moments to reintroduce myself. And since I don't talk about myself much in our shows, and many of you have reached out over the last few months and asked me to share more. So I thought this is a perfect kind of reset, celebratory anniversary show to both paint a picture of where we're going, how we got here, and tell you a little bit more about me as the host, who I am, and how it informs our why and our mission. So let me just start by introducing myself. Hi, it's me. It's been some time since I've told you about me, and so I thought I'd use today's episode to just kind of reintroduce myself and share a bit more of my own story. I describe myself in all of my social profiles, both personal and professional, as a proud dad, uncle, and now grandpa. Then after that, I describe myself as a full-time podcaster, storyteller, and relationship capitalist. Two of those words are just completely fun, made-up words. Storyteller, which my friend Yogi Roth, who is a renowned television football personality and acclaimed filmmaker and author, was the first person in my life to tell me almost 10 years ago that I was a storyteller. And frankly, it's inspired me ever since to further pursue this now professional path of mine as a podcaster. And I also call myself a relationship capitalist, which is a phrase that my friend Tanya Mulray and I came up with one day over coffee in Los Feliz a few years back when we were searching for ways to describe the sort of work we do, or did at the time in my consultative work, and hers as a venture capitalist at the time, but how we value relationships over kind of cash capital. And so we came up with this phrase, relationship capital, and kind of stuck. Those are both also just fun icebreakers when people ask you what you do, inevitably, when they meet you in public or at a networking event, because when you say you're a relationship capitalist or you put that on your name tag, everybody wants to stop you and ask you what that means, right? So that's always part of the trick in networking, is to engage people before you engage them so that they actually want to give you a platform to tell your story. So what is a little bit more of my story? For those that don't know or don't remember, I was born and raised in Chicago. I attended university at Arizona State University in the Phoenix area, so I've lived in both the crazy, cold, hot summer climates of the Midwest as well as then the desert Southwest. I moved here to Southern California in the Los Angeles area in 1997, and I've called this home ever since, even though I have lived abroad for a couple of different periods of my life, both 5 years across dozens of cities in Latin America. And then also I've lived in Boulder, Colorado. I've traveled and worked significantly across Southeast Asia about 20 years ago for about 5 years. And what else about me growing up? I loved playing basketball. Basketball was my sport growing up. I was the kid in the neighborhood back in Chicago that if you wondered where I was, you could always just go listen for a basketball bouncing or find a basketball court close to my house in my neighborhood. And whether it was snowing, raining, sleeting, hailing, or the hottest hot of the summer, I was out there playing hoops somewhere. So I also have coached high school boys basketball and youth basketball here in Southern California. That's how much I love the game. I loved the chance to give back while my daughter was in high school. But before all of that kind of what I do stuff, here's who I am, right? So I say I'm a proud dad first. That's to my incredibly talented and earnest daughter, Riley Ryan Marquez, who's a television writer here in Hollywood and now a new mom. She changed my life forever by allowing me the gift of raising her primarily as a single full-time dad through her preteen and teen years here in Southern California. I always say, and I think about it oftentimes, like how much she and I grew up together from my mid-20s to her now early 30s, and I wouldn't change a bit of it. I say publicly often I'm a proud uncle to all my nieces and nephews, both by blood and by choice, who are an incredibly eclectic mix of adults and wonderfully talented young people across the country and here in Southern California. I'm the luckiest uncle ever. And now, as of 4 months ago, I am a wildly proud grandpa to my new grandson, Leo, who is Riley and Henry's son. And thankfully for me, they live just a few walkable miles from here in Los Angeles. And oh, the fun that we're going to have in the years to come, Leo. People say I'm a loyal, loving friend, and I'm a mentor to many. Tio Rob to many of my mentees and friends across Latin America. That was a nickname that a bunch of young, talented Argentinian entrepreneurs stuck on me when I was living in Chile, and it seems to have stuck and then kind of just exploded and expanded ever since. I'm lucky enough to have friends and mentees spread pretty much likely to every corner of the globe today. And I try and use social media as a medium, and also long-winded personal podcast voice notes, if you've ever had the good fortune to get one of those from me, to keep these relationships going and strong. If you know me at all, or if you're just meeting me, I'll clue you into something about me. There's basically kind of 3 hallmark bits to my personality that drive almost everything else about me and everything else that I do professionally. Relationships, stories, and my fundamental curiosity. Professionally, I've been a 5-time entrepreneur, executive, salesman, and business developer since age 19, which seems like a lifetime ago now, way back when I was interning in the summers for my dad. I've had the privilege to work across financial services and in investment industries, the technology industry, both in the hardware side and the software company side, and consulting services. I've worked for and been mentored by a half dozen of some of the most interesting, experienced, best people I could possibly imagine. I've worked domestically across the United States, but I've also, fortunately, in different chapters of my story, worked in a variety of different places across the world. I worked deeply embedded for 5 years in China, India, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia, as well as did some work in the UK, and of course, most recently, these last 10 years, widely across Latin America, where I met many of you who watch and listen to our shows regularly. I turned my life at one point in my late 40s into kind of a nomadic journey around 2015. I sold, donated, or trashed literally everything I owned except for a few plastic storage bins. I packed up 2 backpacks and 1 suitcase, and I moved myself in my late 40s to Latin America, to Chile in particular. I had never been to South America at that point in my life, and I literally packed it up, got on a plane, and went and lived in Santiago, Chile for about a year. Traveled the region, understood the world in a much more broad sense, having lived and been enriched by those experiences and those relationships. It was during that time that I also began sharing my story, my daily stories on social media as I went through this kind of regenesis of myself. And I called those Rob stories. And I have now, as of today, when this is taping here, February 12th, I have literally written one of those for 3,331 days in a row uninterrupted. So by the time this show releases in about a week or 10 days, that number will be up over 3,340 episodes or stories uninterrupted. So I lived like this, city to city, meeting to meeting, country and continent to one another, till I returned home just weeks before the pandemic. So I literally landed and got settled back in here during the holiday period of 2019 and 2020, just as we began to find out. I'll never forget sitting in a coffee shop in Koreatown and having many of the Korean shop owner friends that I had there tell me that they were getting messages from friends and family across South Korea, which was in early January, essentially portending what was to come and what was coming, already sweeping across Southeast Asia and what was inevitably going to wind up at our doorstep no matter where you lived here in the United States. That experience became kind of like a milestone intermission in my life as I look at it now, as I look back and I look forward. My perspectives on what matters most to me changed inextricably, and my life was in some sense kind of liberated to commit further to my calling as a storyteller of others' human stories. A little bit more on the business side. Professionally, I've worked for big, huge public companies. I've worked for small, fast growth companies that eventually went public or IPO'd. I've worked for companies that have been sold or acquired. I've started or led 4 different small or startup companies. I've sold tens of millions of dollars in revenue and raised capital for both big and small projects in multiple countries, but I've also failed multiple times. I have made and lost lots of money. I had the excruciating leadership experience of having to fire good people and close down failed companies. It has not been an easy professional journey for me, but it has been an incredibly interesting and exhilarating one. In my DNA, I am at my core a salesman and a team leader. As raised and mentored by my dad long before I even realized that that was what he was doing to me or gifting to me. I'm now at age 56, in my late 50s, mid 50s, late 50s. And even though all my friends tell me I should be far less conscious of my age and talk about it less, I have been uber self-aware of my own mortality since about 2006, 2007, when I lost both my parents at my age 38. That year and the years after that challenged everything I knew about life and how it was supposed to work. It began a period of great introspection and reinvention in me, which took probably 5 to 6 to 7 years to fully reveal itself to me. I grew up in modern Midwestern circumstances, but privileged as a white kid who played basketball 24/7 in the city and suburbs of Chicago in the 1970s and 80s. I was blessed with loving parents and a family from a much different era. I had complicated but loving relationships with both my parents and my siblings, some that have been made even more complicated over time. And I was always a bit of a singular soul, curiously searching out other people and their stories. I was always curious about the rest of the world, even though I had not traveled there as a child. I had a National Geographic Explorer and a National Geographic magazine subscription when I was about 12 years old. I read Time magazine, I read the daily newspaper, but I didn't just read the sports sections or the funnies, the comics as we used to call them. I read the front pages and the business sections because I was curious about the stories of other people in other faraway places and parts of the world that I never met and I hadn't yet understood or gotten exposed to. I say to friends that I've been in love 3 times, I've been married twice, and I have 1 amazing daughter. Lucky me, right, to experience such a full, rich life and such a range of emotions in my 56 years. And I'm hopeful that I've got another 30 to 35 years left on this earth to try and find joy, to try and tell stories, to try and love the people who love me the most, and hopefully leave this place, this life, this world that we live in just a little bit better than I found it. In this present chapter, I'm taking all of that life perspective and wisdom gained through all of these experiences, coupled with the help of some wonderfully talented young women from Mexico, Deanna and Ana Paula, and the support and encouragement from a few friends who put their money where their encouragement was to chase this new dream of telling stories for a living. Along with some early sponsors of our shows now pledging their financial support of my work, I am now this full-time podcaster. And eventually at some point here in 2025, I will be an author. I am a speaker host, and I hope to reinvigorate that part of my life professionally. And maybe if we're lucky and we get the right breaks and we have the right people lined up behind us, we'll become a television producer and storyteller in that medium as well, via our company, which is called, joyfully and rightfully, the Storytellers Company, because that's fundamentally what we are. That's the company or the group of people that produce this podcast and some of our other experimental shows and our social content as well. And now we also provide production talent and storytelling skills to other brands and companies beyond ourselves to help them make the best podcast shows that they can make for their communities of clients so they can tell their stories as best possible. I often describe myself as the luckiest man alive to have lived exactly this life with no regrets. Even with all the heartbreak, the heartache, the loss, the successes, the love, the fears, the failures, and the meandering kind of seeking that I did when I was young, I wouldn't change an ounce of it. As my mom always said to me, life could always be a little bit better, but son, it could always be much, much worse. Indeed, at the end of the day, as I look back on the life that I have now and the influence that I am on other people's lives, it was Joyce Ryan, my mom, who was the baseline for human empathy for me. And she did that alongside my dad while he was quietly seeding me with this desire to craft and tell great human stories that I didn't really fully appreciate until I was probably fully into my 40s. So welcome to today's episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. Rob Ryan, that's me. And thank you for sharing in this journey with us and for maybe taking a few minutes to now understand a little bit more about who I am, your host in these conversations that I get to have with these incredibly bright, incredibly talented, incredibly earnest people that we talk to who are truly trying to shape and better the world that we live in. I want to reframe things as we go through the last section here and just say again, wow, 2025, right? Here we are recording in early February. It's almost the 1-year anniversary of the expansion and the rebranding of our show to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. But 2025, and January in particular here, has just been stunning. Honestly, to say that it's been a stunning, almost stilting, knock you off your feet on your butt kind of month here, especially in Los Angeles and in North America and the United States, would be a monumental understatement. What we've experienced here in Los Angeles with a combination of our fires, as well as kind of being a part of the country as a whole, which is going through just a terrible period of essentially kind of wannabe dictatorial, wannabe king, authoritarian takeover of our historic 200 and almost 50-year-old democracy. It's been a lot, and it's weighed heavily on me a lot. I haven't quite known what to say. I haven't quite been able to put together all my thoughts clearly, and I'm welcoming this opportunity to do so. But again, today, I'm more awestruck by the fact that even in these darker moments, even in these more troubling times, it just keeps coming back to me how important the work that we do is. So I'm here again. Let's celebrate like 5 years of podcasts, begun as mentors today with the impetus and crazy inspiration of my friend Ileana Jaime Felix and myself, and then made better and expanded upon and just constantly tweaked and improved by Deanna Bernal, our incredible show producer in Mexico City. Here we are. This is just about when this drops. This will be the 1-year anniversary of our expansion to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And in that context, just to put some numbers to it, if you think about it, we've done about 152 shows total. This, I think, will be like 153, my episode that you're watching right now, over the years across both brands. Something like 200, we'll get to 200 this year, but like if you add in the other 45 plus experimental shows, like our Friday show that I will get back to at some point this year, Stoppage Time, or our special live stream events that we've done over the years as we've experimented with different platforms and ideas, you can clearly see that we've done well over 200 shows. And we will strip well beyond that this year. So it's not just about the numbers of shows. It's not just about how large our audience is. I can remember the days when we would do an incredible episode. We would hang up with each other and think to ourselves like, oh my God, that was an incredible conversation. And then, whoa, the fact that, the weeks later, maybe 3, 4, 6 people would watch or listen. And now I can proudly say that although we still grow very slowly and very organically and very modestly, it's quite a bit different experience to know that there are 100 or 150 or 200 people that are watching or listening to an episode that you're creating, that are, as we used to say metaphorically, sitting in the living room kind of watching me right now in the kitchen as we talk about these, hanging on the words, hanging on the stories of our guests. We're incredibly proud of how we live our why on a weekly basis, right? So in addition to the show being edited and produced by Deanna and our operations being overseen administratively by Ana Paula, 2 powerful, talented young Mexicana women, in the spirit of our commitment to amplifying the diversity of the people and their stories that are not often heard or not discussed enough, we've proudly hosted 78 female guests. So 78 of our guests have been women, 74 have been men. 113 of our guests have been people of color. We're in the business of telling stories that don't get told enough, right, in mainstream business and general media. And that's more important today than ever. We're going to continue to be very intentional about telling these stories from a widely diverse group of entrepreneurial thinkers from every corner of Los Angeles and Southern California, where I live, across the United States, and across our communities in Latin America and eventually the world. As I alluded to, it's dark, challenging times, no matter where you live. I selfishly see life through the lens of where I live here in Los Angeles, how California exists inside of our country, and my life as a United States citizen. And for us and rippling out into the world, it is a dark, challenging time right now with more questions to be answered and more uncertainties than there are answers. And that's never a comfortable place to be. But it's in these moments that we fundamentally believe that our work crafting these conversations and amplifying these particular stories is some of the most important work that we can be doing. Realizing that the reality of the world that we live in presently, climate changing faster than we can keep up with it, an elected wannabe dictator king staging an authoritarian takeover of U.S. democracy, women and people of color getting fewer opportunities to lead and less capital invested in them than ever as entrepreneurs, an AI robot takeover of huge swaths of our employment base and our workforce needs as a society, alongside rising costs for housing and basic needs worldwide. This moment in history demands that we amplify exactly the voices that we have been through these exact types of conversations. And it's one of the reasons that we believe that this present day, as dark as it might be in some moments, is absolutely validation for our show. It's why in these last 6 weeks, as I've struggled to formulate my own thoughts, the thing that I kept coming back to most consistently as I talked to friends, as I talked to guests on the show, was that, man, this is really important that we do this. We believe, obviously, every show is a conversation. And it's a long-form conversation with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across, as I say in the intro, every sector and segment of society, not just entrepreneurs or investors, but all of us. Everybody, I believe, everybody fundamentally, no matter where you work or what you do or what you're studying or where you're striving towards, like, you have the opportunity to be an entrepreneurial thinker, to approach life in an entrepreneurial thinking mindset. There's no time left to kind of wait for someone else to tell these stories. Ultimately, I looked at myself, I've looked at our team multiple times over the last couple of years and just thought to myself, like, someone's got to do it. And I guess I've decided that it's going to be us. Where do you fit in this, though? Where do you fit in this magical equation that creates these conversations? Who are you, entrepreneurial thinkers? Well, in my mind, you're people who approach your work or your studies or your research in ways that are fresh, maybe unconventional, maybe just with a different twist on the old ways. You're people of all ages, races, genders, and ethnicities from all corners of our systems and institutions who aspire to do better and be better. You don't accept the status quo. You're curious, you're pragmatic, you're optimistic without being naive. You believe in the possible and you lean into it. You're not easily deterred by those who push back against you while they cling to past systems and institutions and models that frankly served them and their power well for most of the last 500 years. So in the end, though, we can only tell so many stories. I can literally only create so many podcasts. I guess if, we had 10 Deannas and 3 more me's, we could produce a podcast every single day. But we're not at that point yet. And so what can we do, right? When we can only make so many shows that we own, that our sponsors and ourselves can distribute? Well, we can help you tell your stories within your communities. And that's where we're growing. I'm proud to announce we're growing and expanding our business in service of our why and in service of you. In 2025, we're expanding to offer what we call studio production services to our business model. So now we'll not only continue to produce our own shows and content that we own and distribute together with our sponsors, but we'll be hired by you, by organizations, companies, and brands, maybe like yours, to produce your shows for you and your communities so that we can help you amplify more of the right people and the right stories in this moment of important historic future and continue to grow our ability to continually do this work for a living until the day I die. I want to kind of go back and touch more again on my why, but I want to turn my why in closing here into a bit of a call to action for you. I say all the time, I've said it today a few times already, that we gather to have these conversations in hopes that we leave the world a little bit better than we found it. But to end now, I'm going to challenge you to rise up in your work, to rise up in your studies, to rise up in the industry that you work in, and to dedicate yourself to becoming more of an entrepreneurial thinker every day. I challenge you to look differently at your world as you pass through it, to look for problems to solve, look for opportunities to seize. And if you have a story to tell or you know of someone's story who should be told, reach out, tell me, tell us, introduce us to those people and their stories so that we can tell them. When the world is the darkest it can be, former American television host and renowned good guy from many of our childhoods, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, always said, look for the helpers. We're here to be the helpers. We believe if you're a listener, a viewer, an alumni of our show, a sponsor, or a member of our community, that you are a helper too. So let's help one another shine some light into the dark world and shine that light onto all the other helpers we come across in our entrepreneurial thinking each day. I love you all. I'm so deeply grateful to every one of you, no matter how we know one another, no matter why you're supportive of our work or where you're from. Without your encouragement and your literal support and financial sponsorship, we couldn't be doing this work. The world would exist without these voices. There would not be these 152 episodes and 152 conversations with all of these incredible women, with all these incredible people of color, with all of these forward-thinking, helpful men. None of that would have been heard or ever told to me or by me. And I fundamentally believe that that would have left the world much worse off than we found it. As you know, you can find our shows wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch every week here on our YouTube channel at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, or on Apple or Spotify, and again, any other mechanism that you listen to your podcast. And as always, you can find me at I am Rob Ryan across almost every social platform, or you can email me even if you'd like to at robryan@storytellerscompany.com. I've said it already. I love you. I'm grateful for you. I love the stories we tell. I love the work we do. I hope to God I have another 30 to 35 years left in me to do more of this until I'm 85 or 90, because it's the great pleasure of my life, and turning this into a business that can sustain us, to enable us to touch more lives, to leave this world a little bit better place, as my mom always charged me with, is the greatest thing I could ever hope to give. So cheers. We'll see you next week with another great conversation with an incredible entrepreneurial thinker. And thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.